Hi everyone, native plant spotlight for the day. This specimen right here. Anybody want to take a guess of what this might be? Give you a few hints. It grows prolifically back on the refuge. Drooping, pink-hued flowers. It's wild bleeding heart. So, wild bleeding heart, there are many different specimens, different cultivars, different versions you're going to see in people's gardens. But the one that I'm going to show you today is what you will typically find when you're out hiking, walking about around the nature center property. So why don't we take a closer look and see what we have here. All right, here we are for a closer look at the wild bleeding heart. Other common name for this plant, fringed bleeding heart, and taxonomic name, Dicentra eximia. Now, this plant loves shade, and this is just another specimen that I have growing in my shade garden back home. It can, however, handle part shade, a diffused shade sunlight combination. It can also handle a little bit more sun as long as you are prepared to water it pretty often, at least while it's getting established. Now, we're going to get a little bit closer here. We're going to look at what actually gives it its name, and that is the flower. The flower is a pink, white, and purple-hued drooping flower that can resemble, or does resemble, a heart. So we'll get a little bit closer there and check that out. Now, other bleeding heart species that you're going to see in gardens could be cultivars. They could be the Pacific bleeding heart. And there are other Asian variances. Now, as far as I know, none of the non-native bleeding heart are actually invasive. But I just myself, and this being a native plant garden, do prefer to have the native form or version of the plant if I can get it. Other characteristics of the wild bleeding heart are the fringed leaves. They look very fern-like, and this is what you would look for if you are looking for a native version of this plant. Other leaves from other plants, the cultivars and ones that you'll typically find at a nursery, are going to have a completely different shaped leaf. They're going to lack these fringes. Now, another thing about the bleeding heart is that it is rare in Pennsylvania. It's a rare and endangered plant. However, you wouldn't think that when you walk or hike along the refuge or through the refuge, because it is growing everywhere. In fact, there are instances and places where this plant is actually growing out of the cracks of retaining walls and in the concrete steps near the living roof down by the pond gardens. It is a very hardy plant from what I can tell, and why it does so well back on the refuge, we're not actually sure. It does like shade, it likes acidic, rocky, moist, humus-rich soil, meaning it can kind of handle any kind of soil scenario or combination you can throw at it. As far as propagation goes, it's very easy. Propagation could be done by seed. The seeds should be collected as soon as they are ripe, but you need to, if you're going to store them, you need to keep them moist, or put them directly in the ground immediately after you collect them. As far as division goes, it's real simple. You just basically dig it up, cut the root mass in half, and then replant it somewhere else, and you will end up with a large plant like this. My plant is actually a division of a plant that I had growing at my old property. When I brought it here, it was about maybe 1/10 of the size of what it is here, and now, lo and behold, 2 years later, it is humongous. It's an awesome plant to have in your garden, especially if you have a shade garden. It complements all of the others that I have here: wood poppy, sensitive fern, of course the jack in the pulpit, my bloodroot, and then back to our bleeding heart here. One thing to note about the bleeding heart, and I like to try and touch upon a little bit of whether or not they can be used as an edible. No, absolutely not. 100% this plant is not edible. It is poisonous. I'm not sure the actual chemical, but it is an alkaloid of some kind, and that alkaloid is highly toxic. But one of the benefits to its toxicity is that the plant is actually deer and rabbit resistant. So while something may nibble on it, sample it, browse on it for just a split second, it usually won't eat the whole thing down to the ground because it is toxic. Another cool little fact about this plant that makes it pretty nice for the garden is that it does actually have a pretty long flowering period. They flower for most of the growing season, spring into late summer, even early fall, depending on how cold it gets. It is actually also pretty tolerant of cold temperatures, at least the native one is. I've seen people's bleeding hearts suffer because of the frost that we've had recently, but as you can see, mine has not suffered one bit. If anything, it has just gotten bigger, better, fuller, greener, pinker, purpler, whiter, and it just does very well. The wild one may not be as, air quotes, showy as some of the non-natives and cultivars, but I do find it to be a little bit hardier and, I guess in my words, fuller. I would prefer to have this one in my garden than really any of the others. Well, I hope you all like this little tidbit about this pretty unique plant. We have plenty of it growing on the refuge. I would say as you're hiking around and you see that cute little pink flowering plant along the DNL, along the LNE, or anywhere else you might be hiking, check it out, take a look at it. It's pretty cool. Neat little intricate flowers, and very hardy, and does very well on our refuge, which actually is, in a way, a pretty unique scenario in and of itself because of it being endangered and not doing well other places. Is it the zinc content in our soil? Is it the lack of competition from other plants? We don't really know. However, we have plenty of it. So when you go out on your hike, go check it out. Anyway, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for another plant video.